Hello, everyone. Welcome back to LinkedIn Live. We have a special show for you today. As you can see, I'm joined by, for the first time, my partner in crime. You probably don't know this guy next to me. He's the guy that does all the hard work whilst I'm here gallivanting on LinkedIn, talking with loads of influencers and practitioners from all over the world. So this is, I'd like to introduce my co-founder, Shane Kemp, best friend, best man. He's okay sometimes. He's a bit annoying sometimes as well, but you know.
Most of the time.
So Shane, why are we here today?
Well, it's good to sit in the hot seat, Chris. We're here today because we're going to bring our HR Leaders virtual workshop away from the private screen and actually to LinkedIn Live for the very first time, which I'm incredibly excited about. So this is going to be an amazing session. We're joined by one of our good friends, Christopher Lind, Global Head of Digital Learning at GE Healthcare today. And we're actually going to be showcasing a workshop all around how to reimagine the landscape of people development with technology. So just before Christopher takes his reins, I'm just going to sort of let you know what the recap of this format is. It's a 30-minute case study followed by a 30-minute Q&A. During the case study, of course, you can ask questions, you can leave messages in the comment boxes, really just ask as much as you want, really, because when we jump into the interactive element, Christopher's going to be on hand to answer all of your questions. So I suppose without further ado, let's pass
Hand
it
over to you,
the man
Chris.
over to himself.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning. Hanging in there. Tired, a little bit tired, but that's okay.
Yeah. Before we jump in, as always, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and sort of your journey to where we are today at GE Healthcare.
Yeah, so I joined GE Healthcare almost 3 years to the date. In terms of a little bit about me, I think the simplest thing that I tell people is I've always found myself at the intersection of technology, people development, and business. So that seems to be my MO no matter where I go, which is how I landed here at GE to head up digital learning. And we've done some exciting things, and it's been a journey over the last 3 years, but good stuff to share. So
Fantastic. And you're just as active as us on LinkedIn, right?
I am. Yeah, I would say that. In fact, somebody once came up to me the other day and they're like, "You post on there a lot." I'm like, "Is that a good thing, or is it like I wasn't sure how to take that?" But they said, "No, I really enjoy it." So yeah, aside from just content around, about learning and development, things like that, you're both familiar with one of the other new ventures in terms of learning tech talks that starts next week to talk and try and demystify some of the stuff around technology, which is changing so fast. I think a lot of folks in the L&D space are drowning a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And just for everyone who's listening, we're going to be live streaming that podcast here on LinkedIn as well for all of you guys.
Yep.
To look out for that. So we've got some great companies. What are some of the companies that we have coming up that are going to be featured?
We're kicking off with Loop, with David James, and their CEO is now joining us. So Ben Muzzle's joining us as well. We've got LinkedIn coming up. We've got Mersion. We've got WalkMe. We've got Xyleme. We've got everything from, as you'll see, the capabilities slide I've got built into this. We really are pulling from all aspects of learning technology. So it's not just like an LMS show. It's far more than that.
Nice. Well, let's jump in then. Ready when you are.
I am. All right. Well, let me flip to the full screen so you don't see my icons. So yeah, in terms of the way the flow goes, I think anybody who's connected to me, and you know this just from spending time with me, I'm pretty informal with this. So I'm looking forward to just telling the story. I'm not a big one to read slides, but tell the story that I've been on. And I would say reimagining learning is, I guess, my word, and maybe that's a buzzword, but I really do mean that when I talk about it, because for me, what we're doing with learning and where I'm trying to take learning is not just to do another iteration of something that's been done, but to really truly look at, where are we going and what's possible. And honestly, technology is changing everything. So I think that's the part that's most exciting to me. But getting into it, I am really curious, and you guys can chime in too. But for everybody out there, if you go on your phone or to your browser and go to polev.com/digitalu, I'm always interested, the people that are watching, what comes to mind when they hear these emerging technologies like AR, AI, VR, all this stuff is coming at them, because the comfort level is very different. And if it takes too long, let's see what we get. Chris, I know you're going to be all over it. Shane, you can't touch anything.
Go on, Shane. Go for it.
Sorry.
All right. Not to give anything away, but let's go with this answer.
Scared.
That's
Okay.
that first one. Everyone, everyone on LinkedIn's like, how do I jump on this
Yeah,
website
everybody's like, how do I
whilst on my
jump onto this?
phone?
On
Whilst on
my
my phone.
phone while somebody's live streaming. Well, we'll see what happens here. And people, there's more opportunities for it. So we'll see it. But let's talk about the scared one. We can talk about that a little bit while we see if any other ones come in, because the reality is that's actually a pretty common response. Is people are a little bit terrified, and some people think it's a generational thing. I don't. I think it's just, this is not, a lot of people who got into learning and development did not get into it because they loved tech. They got into it because they loved being around people, or they loved, coaching, or maybe they were a great trainer or salesperson, so they became a sales trainer. And so this whole new world of technology is a little bit foreign and may actually be the opposite of what they're looking to do. And the complexity and overwhelming nature of it is spot on, because it is changing really fast. I was doing a talk, or I was having a conversation with someone about this the other day, and we were talking about the industrial revolution, and how we're going kind of through this other revolution right now. And the big difference is it's happening so much faster. So what used to take years or decades is happening in months in some cases. And so there's a lot of people that are freaking out in kind of generic terms, but it's good to see people that are excited about it. And I think once you demystify it, and once you see what's possible, it does become a lot less scary, no less overwhelming. I used to have a lot more hair than I do now, but still awesome. Okay, so this is really,
we had a lot more through come through there.
we
Chris,
did.
though, right?
I know we did. Yeah. So there's some excitement. There's still some excitement, opportunity. I think people see opportunity as the big one. I think whether people are excited about that opportunity or terrified is where people kind of fall along the mix.
Does it
Misunderstood.
bring bigger ones up that are more that they've
Yes.
the more that
So if you're seeing, right, so opportunity and confused, right? So there's opportunity and confusion around that. Scared, you're scared.
Two ends of
kind
the
of felt.
spectrum. Yeah.
Like I said, though, with opportunity, when you talk to people, how they feel about that opportunity is to opposite ends too. So anyway.
Are these quite common answers that you normally hear?
Yes. Yeah. It's actually, like, everybody thinks, you would think with the way all the talks, or if you go to conferences, people talk about this stuff, like it's second nature, everybody's all comfortable with it. When you really talk to people, even some of the folks that are doing it are pretty uncomfortable with it. So it's not uncommon at all.
Nice.
So this is now where we're going with it. And so, like I said, reimagining is kind of my thing, my brand around it, but we're reimagining the entire learning experience. And what we're doing with that, to give some context around that, because some of it's like the buzzwords, right? Oh, drive next practices through technology, impact business outcomes, all that. But what does that mean? And really, it's about the how, right? How are we delivering this thing? How are we actually implementing it? How are people engaging with it? But really, it's also about the mindset behind it. So we really are creating an ecosystem of infrastructure to enable people. This is really moving away from this, we're going to train people on this stuff. It's about, how do we give them experiences? How do we give them what they need? How do we actually build this in an effective way? Now, it is much easier said than done. And I think you'll see as we get into this, I don't start with the tech. So that's one of the most interesting things I get a reaction from with folks, is they assume that because we're talking about digital learning transformation, the first thing we're going to hit on is tech. Like, let's talk about platforms, capabilities. And honestly, that's the last thing that we talk about, because the reality is, until you know what you're solving for, and until you've figured out exactly how you're going to bring that to life, it really doesn't matter. And actually, I encourage people to stay away from the tech until they figure it out. Otherwise, they end up with a hammer and everything looks like a nail. So in terms of bringing it to life, some of the things we've been working on here that has been a big part of it is this whole blended learning strategy. Is how do we do this? And if you watched, for people who may have seen my latest video about blended learning 2.0, when I talk about blended learning, some people think I mean, oh, so you take the classroom and people do it first and then they still come to the classroom. And that's not what we're talking about. With this, we're really talking about what is the blend of tools and solutions that we need to get people what they need where they are versus just chopping it into two pieces. So that's the strategy that we're working towards. We're also heavily focused. I'm driving very hard that we need to focus on experience. Content's fine. I don't have an issue with content. I don't have an issue with kind of the traditional education standpoint. But the reality is it's all for naught until you actually have a chance to put it into action. And so that's a big part of this, is shifting from this mindset of, well, what's the stuff we're going to tell them? What's the information we're going to give them, to what do we want them to do? And how are we going to get them to have a chance to do that and get better at doing that? The tools and tech are coming into it. And then we've got a big culture change shift. That is something that we're working through as we go around this. One, just being accepting of this whole new, you start saying learning reimagination, new learning, people are like, what? This is foreign to us. But then also really engaging with that.
And just for everyone listening, Christopher. Sorry, I'm Chris. You're Christopher.
No, that's right. It's fine. At least you know that now, so that's good.
For everyone listening, by the way, I am keeping an eye on the LinkedIn comments. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation by Chris, feel free to put them in the LinkedIn chat, and I'm happy to relay them. So just want to let you guys know they're just tuning in.
Yeah, because we've got time for Q&A at the end, but I enjoy if when we're in something, somebody asks, Chris and Shane, if you have stuff too, don't hesitate to stop me. I don't need to be in presentation mode through this whole thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I am curious in terms of, and this is also interesting, where people are at. Where are you on this journey? I think everyone right now, in many cases, is maybe talking about it. But I'm curious where folks who are tuning in would be.
Perfect. So everyone, if you can't see it, it's polev.com/digitalu, and then select your option A, B, C, D, E.
We'll give it a minute. And if while it's coming in, okay. So
here we go.
As these start to chime in, right? This is, and I'll watch the bars move to see if it shifts. Mm-hmm. What I see is normally, right, what people think you would see, right, based on the conversations, you would think a lot of people are D&E, right? That's the way the community talks. That's what I see in kind of the L&D conversations. What I find is when it really comes into practice, there's a lot of people that fall on the B, C range. So the fact that we've got more people moving into D, to me, is actually ahead of the curve. So I guess the folks that we have tuning in, the folks that are chiming in, I guess I can encourage you to say you're on the front end of the change curve. And then we've got those 10%. That usually is what I see. Actually, a lot of times I don't see anybody in the E category. Almost no one is at the point where they have fully integrated. And anybody who is fully integrated, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect, because even I wouldn't say we're at the point where we've.
It's going up now. Look, it's just now you said it.
Now everybody's like, oh wait, no, that's me. I'm there. We've got it all out. Yeah. Well, hey, we can send them one of the stream things. You can come in and you can take over. Tell me how you've mastered it.
That's true. If you guys want to jump in the call, and bring you in. Let us know. If you're in the comment section, you want to jump in and share what you're doing. Let us know. We'll send you a link.
So the nice thing is we've got a good balance of folks here, right? So we've got some folks on the very early stages. We've got some folks. The reality is, though, and this is, I think, the encouraging part, everybody's on a different stage in this journey, and it's really all over the place. So I think sometimes people beat themselves up a little bit and feel like, oh, I went to this conference, I saw this group, and they're an E, right? They're way out here doing this crazy stuff, and we're still back here. And that's okay. It's not about that you've mastered it. It's about that you're on the journey. Mm-hmm. So where it started, I will tell you this, and this, I guess, shows the fact that I have 5 kids, because all my analogies tend to relate to kids' movies or kids' stuff. But when I first joined GE, I felt a lot like this scene in Trolls, where Princess Poppy is about to embark on her quest to Bergentown to save all her friends, because I came in and was thinking, what did I just sign up for? Like this was a little bit overwhelming, a lot bit overwhelming. And it was a bumpy ride. So if you've seen the movie, right, Princess Poppy takes a few knocks and gets kicked down, which is why she sings "Got to Get Back Up Again." And that's what it's been like. And I tell everybody that if you're going on this digital transformation journey, it's not for the faint at heart, but it's completely worthwhile. So that's where I started. And in terms of starting it, I broke it into phases. I had to look at where we were and say, listen, I've done it before. It doesn't work well. Where you do the Maverick thing, you're convinced you're going to come in and just blow everything up and start with phase 4. It doesn't work. The culture spits it out. Things just don't take off. And so we really mapped where are we and where are we going to go? And we did it in phases. And what I don't have highlighted here is all the key kind of elements behind what were the steps were we going to take to move through this. But this was the journey to start socializing. Hey, we're here. This is where I want to take you. Here's the benefits that you're going to get out of it. And here are the things that we're going to do to achieve that. Now that's all fine and good. And this was great. And I reference this still a lot to this day in terms of, hey, how are we mapping back to the phases? Because the reality is these phases change with the way technology is changing, and you actually can slide. So if you're standing still, you're actually moving back. But what I found was one of the biggest challenges was this one. So getting people sold on this, that, okay, I get it, right? There's different phases. We need to move through them. We're going to work towards that. That was, I won't say easy, but we were able to work through that. One of the biggest things, and this is something I see, this isn't just GE, and honestly, everything I'm talking about is not anything that I found unique to GE Healthcare, is in L&D, I think many of us struggle with what I call Stockholm syndrome. And I don't call it, that's a thing, Stockholm syndrome. But when you apply it to L&D, this is what you find is we're really attached to the way we've always done things. We're really attached to it. And in many cases, sometimes it's even stuff we hate, right? And so the Stockholm syndrome analogy works because it's like, well, you're married to your captor. You're doing this stuff that you know isn't effective. You can't stand it. It drives you nuts. You want to do it different, but you can't imagine how it could possibly be any different. And so we've done a lot of work, and I've done a lot of work in trying to help break down this Stockholm syndrome and help people see that, what's possible, what could we do differently, and what does that actually look like? And so that's been a big part of the journey of helping people understand what the possibilities are. Because if you've done the same thing for a very long time, it's hard to imagine that things could be different, could be better.
I have a question, Chris, I want to jump in with. Is that all right? So Ali on LinkedIn said he's interested in understanding your view on what sometimes can be seen as the holy grail of integration, where we have multiple systems in large organizations like the NHS here in the UK. And they're on the pursuit of a full integrated systems, but sometimes that can end up slowing down the pace of change. Do you recognize this picture? That's what he said.
Yeah. And I think this is, so this is my take on this, right? I think sometimes we set the bar high for this full integration. And I think the challenge is the one you mentioned, which is it can slow things down because, and I think the players are getting better at this. The tech providers out there are getting better at recognizing, listen, we have to play nice in the sandbox together. But that hasn't always been the case. So I do think some of this time lost is going to get better over time as technology partners start to recognize, hey, we can't just build our own empire anymore, because that's not the way the world works. And actually, I have conversations with vendors on a regular basis, and I'm surprised, even in the conversations I have with them now, how much more frequently they're saying, oh, these are players that we work with, or these are technologies we pair well with, and we're building that out. So I think the time thing definitely is something to be accounted for. I think the other thing that's challenging is when it comes to this, what is the right full integration? We still sometimes look at that through the lens of what we decide how we would want to experience it. And I think that's the challenge that you can run into and I think this is where LXPs have struggled a little bit, is it was like, this is the one integrate, we're going to integrate all of learning and we're going to integrate it into our one portal. It's like, well, but is that really how people want to experience it? And the reality is that's completely diverse, right? Everybody wants to, some people want to experience their learning through LinkedIn. Some people want to experience it in the LMS. Some people want to experience it over there. So I think that's where it's tough. And I guess I caution people to kind of set that this is the one way we're going to do it. And you just have to tackle it step by step and be realistic, because it is a time suck. It can be.
Yeah, and Ali also said, he said thanks first and foremost, and he said it can also be a disproportionately more cost to the business as well.
Yeah, and that's where, right, with these integrations, so I can give an example of this. I had one where we were implementing a platform, and I won't get into that, but we were talking about okay, well, do we want it to integrate with our HR3 system to be able to get this data? And you start talking about it, and you're like, okay, well, that's 20 grand here. And then we've got this instance, that's 20 grand here. And you're right, it does start to create additional costs, which is where you really have to weigh how much are people going to consume this content or consume this whatever through this platform? Is it realistic or not? Because it does add some cost and IT nightmares, because those things never work seamlessly.
Yeah, never. They promise you the dream, right?
Right. It's like, oh yeah, all you do is you click the connector and like magically everything works.
You've got the API and it works. It's fine.
Yeah, because those never go wrong or break down. So yeah, it is something you have to approach cautiously.
Yeah, and if for everyone asking, by the way, LinkedIn, yes, the slides will be available after. There will be a link for you to we'll leave at the end. If you sign up to the HR Leaders community, you'll be able to access all of our previous recordings, the slides. You can access the community of all the other members. We have over 200 presentations like this in there for you to access immediately after, but you will need to sign up. We'll add a link at the end for you guys. So I'll let you get back to the presentation, Chris.
Yeah.
There's always
a
email address. Yep. We need your email address and your first name. Come on, it's not a lot to ask for, guys.
Actually, slight catch. If your role is to provide HR solutions or you're a consultancy, unfortunately, sorry guys, no,
that's
it's
also
not available.
Our community, just to be clear, just to be clear for everyone, if the name doesn't already say it, that HR Leaders, our community is designed strictly for practitioners in this space, because we want to keep it confidential and people can share and their challenges, their concerns, and their work they're doing in a safe environment. So we do vet every person that tries to sign up after, just so you know. So yeah. Perfect. Cool. We'll let you get back to the presentation, Chris.
No, hey, no, when things come in, see, I know you're going to get better at it, I tell you. And don't hesitate to pause me on that. I love kind of going on the tangents. So one of the things that we dove into was, right, because who cares what we think? And this is, I think, one of the biggest battles with L&D is, right, that internal desire to be like, we think this is great, or we think this is going to be an awesome solution. Like at the end of the day, I don't really care what we think is helpful. It's really about what matters to the employee, right? They're our customer. And when you think about customer centricity, that should be our number one goal. And so we really wanted to find out, what is that? Like, what is it that you're looking for? And not that you run out and everything they say you action against, because sometimes the way they describe it, they don't really know how to articulate what it is they want, but you can dig underneath the surface of what it was. And we distilled that down to 3 things, which was experience. People wanted experiences, and not just experiences like, wow, I got to experience that e-learning, because right, that's an experience, I guess, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted to be able to experience things in a way that really inspired them. Relevance is a big one. And to me, this is one of the most exciting parts about technology, is the fact that instead of having to deliver things to people on our timing, we can deliver it to people, on their timing. And it used to be the only time you could do that is if they pulled. But now with technology, we can push with relevance. And that's exciting to me, so that what we're pushing is relevant to them. And then simple. This is probably one of the biggest challenges with all these with building out a tech stack, is people get very confused. They're like, so wait, this platform's for this, and I use this for this, and how do we simplify that? And that's where we continue to evaluate that to make sure we're not building something that's awesome, but nobody has any idea how to work with it. And so as a result, they just shut down, because that's the risk. The other big part of it that we have been working on, and this is what I've now kind of tagged as the KFD trifecta. So when I look at learning effectiveness, I look at it through no, feel, do. Right. This is the KFD part. And a lot of times we're pretty good, I would say, at the no part. Yeah, I think everybody understands the education. It's like, oh, what's the information? What do they have to understand and learn? And what is all this content? We do okay with that. And I would say technology is still doing a lot to help us do a better job with that, make it more consumable, make it easier to understand. Where we historically, I've seen just over my entire career, sometimes we forget is how important the emotional side, the feeling part of this is. How important is it to create an emotional connection between what you're asking people to do or learn or things like that? Because if they don't care, it doesn't stick. There's just no stickiness to it. And so we really have been intentional about thinking about, how do we want them to feel? Do we want them to feel inspired? Do we want them to feel, empowered? Do we want them to feel equipped? What is that we're doing? And we're very intentional at looking at when we're designing something to say, all right, yeah, we want them to know this, but as a result of that, how do we want them to feel?
Could you
and
give
then
an
the
example,
other,
Christopher? Could you give an example of how you're doing that?
yeah, so I can give one of just a big one that comes to mind is, so around our we're a healthcare company. And so part of that is really helping people. So artificial intelligence is big. It's kind of out there. It's mythical in some regards. And so as you're trying to help people better understand artificial intelligence and how it connects to healthcare, we really want to connect it to the patient. And how is artificial intelligence changing healthcare? And how is that changing, the speed at which we can diagnose diseases, the speed at which we can detect cancer, things like that. So there's an emotional connection between why does it matter that I know how these emerging technologies are affecting what I do, so I can feel really good about that and I can feel connected to what we're doing. So that's probably one very quick example. And then the last one is the do part. This, I would say, a lot of times falls short when it comes to learning. We tell people a lot of great things. We give them sometimes even chances to practice this stuff. We get them all warm and fuzzy. They leave, they're filled with donuts and coffee, and they're thrilled. And then we're like, go back. And we don't really tell them, go back and do this. Like, this is how you were doing it before. This is how we want you to do this moving forward. And so really, what is that desired behavior that we're looking for? And to me, this is really, right, this is the measurement piece that matters. I mean, it's fine that we're measuring whether people are consuming content, whether they're, they feel good about stuff. But at the end of the day, we really want to know, are they better at performing a certain task tomorrow than they were yesterday? And so we're really looking at that. And that's that piece. So this is kind of a one slide overview of how we're doing that. And I won't get into the acronyms because then we'd be here for the rest of the day. Right. I know we do. But it's about this. Okay. We did this whole reimagination. So everything leading up to this has been building this strategy of, okay, we need to think differently. It's a process. It's a journey. We need to break down this attachment to the way we've always done things. This was all part of it. But then the reality is I've found at GE and other organizations, we needed to attach it to something. It needed to be attached to a business initiative, because if it was just like learning's doing this cool thing, everybody goes, so what? I don't care. And so we really had to say, okay, what is something that is really important to the business that we can attach all these principles to, lock on, and now go? And so this was where, we needed to accelerate the clinical and product knowledge of our people. And so that's where we said, okay, we've got this beautiful learning reimagination thing. We've got this whole construct, this mindset, this approach, this methodology, if you will, to how we're going to do it. Let's apply it to clinical and product knowledge for our sales teams. And so that's where we said, okay, that means we're going to break this into the clinical side, the customer side, the product. So this is just an overview of how we've now taken this whole architecture and construct and now applied it to a thing and said, okay, let's break this down, right? Let's break this down into these 4 buckets of how we're going to do it. Now, right, remember I said, I don't bring the technology piece in till the end, and that's intentional because we had to have a problem to solve. We had to have a whole construct to apply it to before we went out and do it. And so it's at this point that we really start diving into the actual tactics, right? What are the technologies that we're using? And I'll share some of this stuff now in terms of how. So we have all this. We have all this cool strategy. We've now found a thing we're going to apply to. We have a problem to solve. Now let's boil it down to that. So before we do, though, because again, when I start getting into the tech, and Chris and Shane, feel free to be like, dial it back, buddy. Like you're losing us. I have no idea what you're talking about anymore. I am curious in terms of where people are at who are watching. What's your comfort level? If somebody said, hey, come on the live stream, help me understand, you in seventh grade language, explain to everyone the difference between AI, VR, MR, and AR.
So for those on the mobile where the text may be a little bit small, if you go to pollev, so POLLEV.com/digital-u, you'll be able to cast your vote there. Or you can text digital U to 22333 as well. The tech
See,
guys,
that's why you're here. There you go. I love it.
We can't leave it at 33%, 33%.
No. So I will say, right, nobody, well, of course I'm going to say this and somebody's going to hit D. I have yet to ever have anybody be like, yeah, get off the stage. I've got this. I'm taking over. Right. I've not had anybody do it, but, so I will say this is pretty normal in terms of what I see in my own informal conversations with people and the results. There is a small percentage that may say, I could describe it at a high level. Like I could maybe kind of hit on it. If somebody said, what's virtual reality? I could maybe give a description. But if somebody wanted to go deeper and say, oh yeah, tell me how you're actually applying it, like back off, like no way, not there yet. So we've got a pretty standard group of folks, which is interesting. What's interesting, right, is earlier in the polls, we had some folks that they fully integrated this technology. So we've got, what that technology looks like. Oh, well, somebody did it. I told you it was going to happen.
That's probably Ivan who's controlling the show right now.
I know. Ivan's over there going, I hand over.
He has got a VR headset in his house.
So do I. I've got it here. So before we get into the tech, one of the things, and this is something that I put together that I hope helps people visualize how the tech stack for learning and development fits together. And one of the things I did with this is I stripped out all the vendors, because one of the things when you start getting into the technology stack is people start saying, oh, this is, Degreed, or this is, what Fuse. People start talking about the platforms, and I really wanted to strip that out so we could just look at what are the activities or the capabilities we need to do, and how can technology support us, so that as we look at our tech stack, we can start to evaluate, okay, this technology's capability covers this bucket, or we use this tool for this bucket, and we can start to do a heat map to say, where are we green, right? Where are we good? Where are we covered? Where are we yellow? Maybe we have something, but it's not the best, or we aren't happy with it. And then where do we have black holes, right? Where are the black holes in our organization that we need to solve for? So the ones that I'm going to get into are, I've highlighted here. Now the yellow is something that I would say it's something that we have on our radar. I have it on my radar. It's not our top priority right now, because we have some things in place, and we're looking at that. So going back to the integrations question later that came up earlier, we need to get our tech stack right before we start deciding, hey, are we going to bring these tools are we going to integrate in with Salesforce? Are we going to integrate in with some of these other things? We need to make sure we have the right tech stack and the right situations first. Some of the data and analytics, we need to make sure we are getting good data and we have quality data before we start making decisions and throwing AI at that data, because I don't want a machine to be making really bad decisions really fast. So we need to make sure that we're doing that. So where I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these emerging technologies that we're exploring and that we're doing some things with is, and oh, you can't see the bottom because it says, I guess I could say hide, right? Oh, shoot. Yeah, anyway, the bottom one says user-generated content, system guidance and experience guidance, knowledge application and reinforcement. That's really where we're hedging some bets right now, and some of the things that I'm going to talk about.
Christopher, before you jump in, can I throw in a
Yeah,
question to you from
you
LinkedIn?
can.
So Amanda said, if you had to start small
Mhm.
and show a new way to the business, what's your recommendation?
Let me throw that one back to you in terms of what types of situations, and it depends on how fast you can answer this. What types of situations are you really struggling with, right? Because I may be able to say, if this is where you're at, you may be able to start small here, depending on where you are. But while you're answering that, and Chris interrupt me when she gets back,
I will.
a lot of times where I've started, sometimes where you can fail is you go big with like a big integration, a big platform, you bring something in and it's too expensive, it takes too long to deliver, and by the time you've actually done it, it's like, ugh, you've lost all the momentum. So some of the easiest things that I think have worked well for me is one, mastering virtual delivery of stuff. And that may sound really simple. People are like, that's your big innovation, but we're really bad at it. We're still so far. And I'm not just saying me or GE, I'm saying as a whole, virtual delivery is still very poor. It's people hammering through slides. It's not engaging. People fall asleep, things like that. And so we're not reaching people. And it's a very simple thing to get well, and it can start to prove to people that you can do things very effectively from wherever they are. And it's not perfect, but it's a good starting spot. And if you start to master that, it starts to open the door for, okay, so if we can do things virtually, what could we do digitally? Like, what could we, it starts to, you start to be able to ask those questions. The other one is around the way content's designed. There are so many tools out there that allow you to make content in new and different and more consumable ways that I've found, again, that can start to help people break the cycle of what they think digital learning is. I posted a question on LinkedIn or an answer to somebody, how they define the difference between digital learning and e-learning, because a lot of times people, they think they're synonymous. And most people's reaction to e-learning is like it's terrible. Like, I know it's awful. I click through the thing, I mash my way to the quiz, and then I just hammer through as many questions as I can, and then I review my answers, and then I go back and I, do. That's what they think of when they think of e-learning. And if you can start changing that by designing interesting, unique, dynamic content, it again opens the gateway for people to say, maybe this whole digital learning thing doesn't have to be awful. And that can start the conversation and open the doors for bigger and better things.
Christopher, I got the response from
Yeah.
Amanda, and she said specifically leadership development.
Leadership development. Okay. Well, one of the things I will talk, it depends on if you want to go big or go home. The two things, seriously, the two things, yeah. So the two things I talked about are good, right? If you have an organization that, going back to my one question, like, where are you on the journey? If your organization's early on the journey, don't go big, because people, they'll just go, that's too weird. Like, that's too far out for me. The content and the virtual are good starting spots. I'll answer your question when I get to one of the things we're doing, because I think the implications for leadership development are huge. So I'll table that one. But again, don't ignore my previous answer, because my previous answer would still apply. Okay. So one of the technologies that we're diving into is augmented reality. And again, going back to, hey, if you're not sure, augmented, virtual, mixed reality, augmented reality, when I talk about augmented reality, is not aware of your environment. So that's the difference between augmented and mixed. Mixed is actually, it's going to know there's a wall here and things like that. Augmented is it's just kind of layering something over the top of it. Think Pokemon Go. There's a reason people got hit by buses in Pokemon Go, because the Pokemon didn't know it was standing in the middle of an intersection. And so how we're using augmented reality with this is we have big, heavy, expensive products. And that's not easy to help people visualize a product. And it's also hard for people who may not be familiar with the product internally, as our employees, to be able to touch, feel, experience the product, and know how our product works. And so that's where augmented reality is allowing us to give people the opportunity to see, visualize, and experience our products from where they are. So no longer are we limited to say, well, it's not until you can come to our healthcare institute, or you can get into a hospital and go into an OR and see where one of these things is sitting. You actually have the ability to do that. Now, this is something that we've been kind of toying with and figuring out, how do we leverage this and maximize its capability. But to me, this one's showing tremendous promise, because our problem was we cannot mail as a new hire, or even you switch modalities and you go to a different business. We can't mail our portfolio of products to you. And it's also not something that you can dynamically really learn about through an e-learning. And so this creates a very powerful learning experience for people to be able to see things with them. So that's one, right? So that's one example of AR. And the other thing too, I'll add to this AR. People used to think AR like, holy smokes, that's nuts, that's out there, it's expensive, it's time consuming, it's way too hard to do. That has changed dramatically. And I think that's one of the biggest parts of why I spend so much time exploring technology, is because not only is new technology coming out, but the technology that's out there that maybe was untouchable for many organizations is now within reach. And augmented reality is becoming one of those. We can do a scan with an iPad and get a photorealistic Pixar quality model of a thing, like that, very inexpensive, very quickly. And so that's where AR used to be a lot more difficult. I've seen it make some huge strides, and that's where we had actually tabled this for a while because it was too cost prohibitive, it was too complex. So that's one. Another one is artificial intelligence. A lot of people were talking about, well, what is AI? How is AI going to affect learning and development and things like that? I told you before in the analytics piece, I'm not diving real heavy into AI because I need to make sure our data quality is there. I just don't know that I trust, one, we haven't been capturing the right data and managing the right data for what I would want to analyze, but two, we just need to make sure it's clean. But one thing artificial intelligence is coming out in, and maybe this is your leadership development question, this is one of the answers to this, it's getting really good at voice recognition. It's getting extremely good at voice recognition. And so, we're looking at right now as an augmentation to this acceleration of product and clinical is, can we give people real-time feedback using artificial intelligence? So coaching, right? Can we provide coaching? It's great if your boss is sitting by your side all the time, and every time you're trying to do something, they can give you that feedback. The reality is that's not there. So how can we use technology to give people a coach with them at any point in time, so that they can basically give a pitch or they can say something and AI can actually analyze that? And with what AI can do with sentiment now, we can get some powerful feedback on, how did somebody perform? We can look for keywords, we can look for different things and give people real-time feedback. And now we can eliminate having to wait for a person to do that. Now, that doesn't mean we eliminate a person from coaching, but what we can do is augment that person so that they can do it much faster and much more in real time.
This technology is already here, right?
It is
having
right.
an Alexa type device in your meeting room whilst you're having that meeting, which then can listen in and then sort of email you after with a dashboard of giving you feedback on how that meeting went.
Yeah, that's the thing. People think this is like futuristic, like, yeah, Jetsons stuff. It's way out there, and it's not. This is here now. And like I said, I've been following AI for a long time, and this is one of the parts of it that has now reached a level of maturity, I think, that it's extremely powerful. So that's that one. And then this is one that I'm extremely excited about. And to your leadership development question, if you want to go big, this is one that I think is huge, is that when it comes to learning and development, like I said before, in the know, feel, do, we do a pretty good job of know. We're getting better at the feel. We struggle with the do, and a lot of times it's because we're in these situations where it's extremely difficult to actually have people do stuff. We can't always bring them together. We can give them like a guide or say, hey, go do this with your manager. Here's a guide, go have this conversation, get feedback. But we really don't know whether they did it. We can't really measure it. We don't really know what happened. And so this is where technology is changing this landscape big time, in that I'm calling these micro experiences, but we can actually deliver micro experiences to people where they are and give them a chance to practice, reflect, get feedback, and then reapply it, which is the exact process that you change behavior. You do it, you get some feedback, you reflect on that, you learn from it, and then you apply it, and you just keep repeating that over and over and over. And so this may look right like a video game. And I will say this is where sometimes people are like, technology doing these types of things is a little clunky. And I agree. If you're going for a true just tech solution, it can be a little bit clunky. But and this is there's a technology out there. It's called Mersion. You can check it out. I think there's some other players in it, but Mersion's who I'm looking at, and they've augmented these virtual environments with a person. And to me, that was the competitive differentiator, because now instead of just, you're talking to this computer and it feels like this really awkward, role play, there's a person on the other end, but that person's augmented with technology so that they're able to change their voice. They can control different people. They can dynamically respond. AI can see your camera and respond to your movements and things like that. So it's a much different experience and feels realistic. So we can actually simulate that. And to me, this is the apex, because now, yes, we can deliver content. Yes, we can give people, dynamic feedback, but two, we can actually give people opportunities to practice, and we don't have to expect them to go somewhere to do it. So that's a little bit about the journey. That's some of the big things that we're diving into. And then this is the part where I'll throw it back to everybody else and we can open it up for Q&A, which is, what's holding you back from digitally transforming the way you develop your employees?
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Christopher.
Yeah.
Christopher, this is so hard as someone called Chris to say Christopher to someone else. You wouldn't think it'd be that difficult, right?
You wouldn't think so.
If you want to keep that question up that you just had.
Yep. Hang on
for a second. So actually, I can call. I suppose I can leave it up for a second so everyone can just grab the question. I've got a few questions I wanted to ask anyway that people had. Amanda basically said, first and foremost, she's early, very early on her journey.
Okay.
And then the other question I had was from Ali, and he said, he'd love to know how you're measuring the ROI on learning effectiveness and L&D. Notoriously is something which is obviously difficult to do.
The good old return on investment question. Yeah.
You knew it was coming.
No, I do. And this is, so I will say, as part of the whole learning, and let me know how long you want me to keep the question up, because I can kill it too whenever you're ready. The whole, how do you measure the effectiveness of learning and development? This has been something that's been part of this whole learning reimagination journey. And I will say we have not cracked this nut. So Ali, I won't say, we've solved it over here, because we haven't. And I don't know that we ever will in L&D, because it's always evolving. But one of the biggest shifts that I've really been driving is pushing accountability on L&D for what we can control. And that's not just, some people are like, so you're saying smile sheets? No, that's not what I'm saying, right? That's a cop-out to me. And I still think those things are important. But what we're looking at, and this is why the kind of micro experiences to me is huge, is that what we can measure is whether somebody's able to do something differently than they could before. Mm-hmm. That I can take ownership of. I can say, I can bring somebody in. This is how they performed. I provided these resources and these experiences along the way. And on the other end, they were able to perform this way. That is a quantifiable metric that I can create, and I can then push back to the business. But this is where it creates shared skin in the game with the business, is that when I work with them, it's, you need to help me pick what are those behaviors we need to change. I'm not the business expert. I am not the subject matter expert on your business. So you can pick them. You're accountable for picking the right ones. I will take full accountability for making sure that we actually move the needle on those. Now, whether that drives revenue, whether that drives, margin, price, things like that, that's a shared metric now, because I've said I can control the behavior. You have to pick the right behavior. We'll work together to do this. And now, instead of it just being a dump off to L&D to be like, hey, you're now responsible for revenue, when I know full well, right, that is a crapshoot whether or not I can actually impact that. That allows me to say, look, I'm taking full accountability for what I can control, but in a meaningful and impactful way, not just people felt good about the bagels or they really enjoyed, getting out of the office for a couple of days.
I've well, there's 78 people listening, so I'm sure you guys have got some answers to the question. Kevin just said, Christopher, there's quite a few things just holding it back. So he said infrastructure, resources, education, buy-in, complexity are just a few of the hurdles implementing the technologies.
Yeah, I will say there's no shortage of them, right? And that's where this journey I've been on, it's been a journey, right? Like I said, I had all my hair when I started.
Even your cartoon character, that you
Even
got
my
has lost
cartoon
hair.
character has lost his hair. Even in my dream animated world, I'm bald. So all I can say to that is I can relate to that. I can sympathize with that. I think a lot of us are struggling with that. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So I always offer to people, if you want to connect, we can, because again, it's very personal. And that whole, where do you start, is very variable on, right, what's the maturity of your organization? What's the history of L&D? Because sometimes if you're an L&D organization that has a reputation or has been known for this, and now you're trying to come in and be like, hey, we want to do things different, right? They may be like, yeah, right. I know the game that we're playing right now. And so then there's this whole reputational thing. So that's where there's not a silver bullet solution. And I think sometimes we try and take our tool bag and we march around and we just try and apply it everywhere we go. And I found in my career, I've had to reassess everywhere I've been at in terms on, a lot of different factors to be able to say, okay, what's the right starting point? What's the right starting point for this org? What does that journey map look like? You can't look at my 4 stages and just go, boom, okay, I'm going to take a picture of that and apply it to our company.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. What's the most common question you typically get from your colleagues? I know you also run a sort of a monthly or weekly meeting with other learning leaders. What are some of the key challenges that they're coming to you with?
So the group that I meet with, right, we're, shout out to you guys if you're watching, because it's an awesome group of folks, is really about how do we stay 5 years ahead of where we are today. So that's less of a, they're coming to me saying, Christopher, what do you know, how can you help us with this? That group is really focused on, hey, all these technologies are emerging. Which ones are we going to make our bets on? Which ones do we think are going to, float with the wind? And then the other one is that whole, like, well, how do we divide and conquer on this? In terms of the questions I get a lot of times it's around, help us demystify this ecosystem. Everybody's talking about it, but what does that mean? And that's where that capability map is extremely helpful. And that's a resource that I do give to a lot of people where I'm like, think about it this way, because that will help you identify, you need to be able to do all these things in some capacity. Where are your gaps today? And maybe what you're doing is working well in 2/3 of it. Don't mess with that. Figure out the other third. So I think that's the question I get a lot is, where should we be making our bets on technology, and where should we just kind of leave things for right now?
Yeah, but as you said earlier, you have to start with the business challenge first.
You have to.
Before you even get to the technologies, which
Exactly.
Whereas a lot of people are getting distracted by the new shiny object that comes across their desk, but does it actually align with the business needs? If not, then just ignore it.
And that, I was at a conference yesterday and I said, that's my biggest thing. I've been doing it long enough now that I can go look at technology, and I tell, providers all the time, I'm like, I'm probably not going to buy anything, just so you know, but like I can get past that.
I bet they love you.
They do. Yeah. Right. Oh, thanks for the time. No, but I think for orgs that haven't immersed themselves this much, it's very dangerous territory. It's very dangerous territory to start getting into the tech, and you don't know what you're walking into, and you don't know what problem you're trying to solve, because selling it to the business then is 10 times harder, because 1, you don't even understand the technology, and 2, you don't even have a problem you're trying to solve, and now you're trying to pitch it. It'll fail. So
Amanda, by the way, Christopher said, how long has your journey been so far? Oh, that was
my entire career.
You just exhaled a lot of stress.
It's been my entire career, right? So what? Coming up on 20 years. The GE journey has been 2.5 years in the making, right? And we just got to the starting line. I would say, maybe beginning of this year is where we started taking things off. So that's where, when people talk about this stuff and they're like, I did it in 3 months. I'm like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. Maybe you were at this point and you jumped from point C to D in 3 months, but this whole journey takes time.
Okay, Peter Anthony has a question. He says the challenge for him is to create a personalized learner-centric tool slash portal that is relevant for all and really focused on the needs of the employees, and it remains very easy to use at the same time. It is about linking all the information available in different systems and then putting them into one ecosystem that they can start from an employee-centric perspective.
It sounds so simple, doesn't it?
It does, right? You haven't figured that one out yet? So here's my take on this one. And I think this is where, to some degree, I think sometimes we spend too much time trying to figure out how do we get all the content in the right spot, right? Which is important. I don't want to downplay the importance of that, because it does matter. When you have things in 500 different places and employees are like, I don't even know where to get the stuff, that's a problem. So I always tell people, don't take my answer to mean I don't care about that or that shouldn't matter. The reason I think sometimes we get too caught up in that is that you will never solve that problem, because everybody is unique. Everybody has their own comfort zones. Everybody has their own tools, their own things they're comfortable with. Everybody figures out their own stuff. And so you could spend your entire career trying to perfect that like one thing that you can finally build, and everybody goes, oh, thanks, L&D. Like, you finally made the thing, and everybody unanimously agrees. And that's where I kind of have made a shift is I've always pushed the fact that it's like, what are the behaviors and the outcomes that we're trying to drive? Let's empower people to figure out what works best for them, but let's be lock solid clear on what they want, what we want them to do, and what's expected of them. And yes, if they need guidance and tools, we'll provide that, but let's let them figure that out. I think sometimes we get so focused on like force feeding everybody through the same journey. And so we're trying to craft the right journey for everybody. And it's like, well, why don't we're adults. Let's tell them what we need them to do. Let's tell them what's expected. Let's give them what they need, but then let's let them do it. Like, let's just let them go. And I think when you start to focus on that, that's where you start to shift and focus the healthy balance on the experience, the metrics of behavior, while not completely abandoning this whole, well, how do people find the content? How do they manage it? Things like that. Okay. So yeah, it's not a very discouraging answer that you're not going to get that answer. He's like, shoot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's always difficult. Well, Danielle's just said, great job, everyone, and thank you for sharing your experience. So I'm guessing that's not me and Chris.
No,
so Christopher, that's definitely you. She shared her thoughts, which is what is sometimes holding their organization back is that they have many enthusiasts selling the technology, but the message is not really targeted to the different generations within the organization that they have. Have you experienced sort of similar encounters at GE? I guess in such a huge multi-generational workforce, it must be quite similar in that sense.
Yeah. So the tailoring the message part, right? I completely agree with. And that's where being able to tailor the message to your audience is huge. And I will tell you, I've gotten kicked in the teeth plenty of times where I've been like, I'm delivering this message, and you can just tell people like, what? I don't know what you just, and you're like, well, back to the drawing board, because clearly that didn't resonate. The part I caution people about is the generational piece. I'm very cautious when people say, well, how do we tackle this generational thing? Because there's a lot of misperceptions that, and I've seen organizations do this. They're like, oh, millennials, they get technology. No, not necessarily. That is a really bad assumption to make, that, oh, they're so tech savvy because they're on Instagram. If
you work with Shane, you'll realize that's not the case.
Right? So Shane, you can, right? Then fine. Shane, you can speak to it, right? Just because maybe you're on Instagram.
He's got a notepad and a pencil. He's not on his iPad.
and so that's a misperception. There's also a misperception that older generations, the baby boomers, they just don't get tech. Some of the most tech savvy people I've met are boomers, because they've seen it from, the whole journey, and they can navigate it seamlessly. And so when you start doing the generational biases, you're like, oh, we've got a bunch of millennials here, so we'll just assume they know everything. Like, you better not. That will blow up in your face. And so I think that's where it is more about, yes, you need to tailor the message, but tailor the message more around what are they doing, right? What is the flow? Who's this audience? What is their flow of work? And then let's tell that story that matches what matters to them, less than like, oh, we've got, all our millennials are in this office, so we can just assume we don't need to do training there because they get it.
Yeah. Well, unless you guys have any questions, I think we're gonna let Chris get back to his life. Christopher, I'm trying to say as well.
That's going to be your goal. That's going to be your goal, Chris. Your goal is
so
going to
hard.
be not to call me Chris.
It's so difficult. Christopher. I should know that considering my name on LinkedIn it is Christopher right now as well. Well, look, thanks everyone for joining us. Chris, we really appreciate Christopher. Really appreciate you taking the time out to join us as always. And this is our first ever sort of LinkedIn Live HR virtual series workshop. So it was a pleasure having you as the person delivering it.
Yeah, thanks for having me be the guinea pig. I guess being the digital guy, it makes sense that we'd experiment with a new digital platform.
Yeah, well, like, who's going to be able to jump on the live stream and not disconnect and have a great microphone?
I'm glad those were the criteria that you used to decide. He's got a good mic. It
wasn't about your experience. No one cares about your experience.
Nobody cares about that.
And thank you to everyone, obviously, for tuning in on all the questions. Really appreciate you guys. We're going to be doing this every 2 weeks. We're going to have one of the leaders within the HR leaders community join us here live on LinkedIn to share their journey and experience around a particular focus. So we're really excited to be bringing you this content. It doesn't work without you guys too. So again, we really appreciate you tuning in and all of your questions as well. I know I keep getting more and more people messaging me, even in my personal profile right now on LinkedIn, saying, where are the slides? So to access the slides, if you click on the link, we're going to post it in the, it's already there, I believe, in the comment section. You'll be able to join the HR leaders community to access the content, the video, the slides, the show notes. Everything you need will be in there. You'll also be able to join our private community and connect with people like Christopher and the other leaders that are in there to continue these conversations. We have our own LMS, surprised or not, within there, which you'll be able to access all of the previous workshops and upcoming sessions that we have as well once they're in there as well. So apart from that, if you're new to this channel, follow me here on LinkedIn. That way you'll be notified next time we go live. Make sure you go and follow Christopher. He posts content more than me in some weeks. So, do you have a schedule, Christopher, that everyone should be aware of? Do you have a content schedule or?
So the LinkedIn, the Learning Tech Talks piece, which I'm excited starts. Our days are a little off for the next couple weeks, but that's typically going to be on Tuesdays till December, and then we're going to do it on Fridays. So more details to come if you follow me, or the details will come on what Learning Tech Talks is. The other stuff, it's just like when it pops into my head. Honestly, it's I'll be thinking of something and I'll make a video and then put it out there. I try and do at least one a week and at least one thoughtful kind of written post a week. But other than that, it just depends on my mood.
Fantastic.
Or if my wife's having a baby, that's another factor that impacts
You're gonna go for 6 now.
She's probably watching. She's probably watching right now going, don't answer that.
I'm surprised we managed to get you live on LinkedIn, to be honest. I can barely deal with one. So, look, before we wrap up, if there's one parting piece of guidance, what would that be? And also the best way for anyone to reach out to you if they have a question and they want to follow up with you personally.
So I'll answer the easy one first, which is best way to reach out to me is LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. In terms of parting advice, right? My parting advice would be the biggest thing is no matter where you are in the journey, don't get discouraged if you feel like you're here or you're there, or if it's going really bad. I can give you lots of war stories. It does not go well a lot, and that's just the reality of it. But it's about, and again, this is why I love Princess Poppy, right? She gets back up again. She sings about it. And that's the biggest thing, is that it is worth it. I've seen it through in enough organizations that's why I'm not skeptical. I'm not like, is this a waste of time and energy? It's worth it. It is totally worth it. And that's where I just always tell people, just keep moving forward. Don't ever stand still or you're sliding back. So whatever that is, just keep stepping forward.
Fantastic. Well, look, we'll let you all go. Thanks a lot again, Christopher. We look forward to seeing you all in a week, 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 weeks from now, same time.
Same time, same place, same channel. And yeah, see you all again soon. See you later, guys. Bye.
All right. Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks.
And we're back.
And here we are.